Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of the Cuphead show. Okay, so it's been a while since I've reviewed the Cuphead show, but I figured I would get back into it again, especially since the second season, or the second part of the first season, or whatever's coming next, because Netflix has kind of done something weird with this one. But yeah, the next part of the second season is coming up, of the season is coming up, so I figured I might as well review the rest of it, because it's coming out this summer. But yeah, this episode is kind of interesting in that this episode is finally gets everything back on track and just kind of continues the quote-unquote plot of this show. And what we find out is that the overarching antagonist of the episode and of the series overall is the devil's accountant, who won't let him forget that he's missing a soul. So yeah, the episode opens up with what seems to be the two of them getting Cuphead, Mugman, and Elder Kettle going on with their day as per normal. Elder Kettle is making breakfast. He's currently making pancakes, and he tosses them to Cuphead, who catches them like he normally does. And Mugman, of course, drops his, but then Mugman goes to actually peel one of them away because it got stuck on the wall. And then a face appears and proceeds to eat him, and Mugman screams for help, with Cuphead trying to free him, but failing. And he turns to Elder Kettle for help, but by this point Elder Kettle has turned into a skeleton and collapses. And this of course causes Cuphead to become increasingly distressed and upset, and does proceed to point out that obviously he doesn't know what to do and how to get help. But it's at this point where the goat from the front yard proceeds to barge through the window and asks Cuphead if it remembers him. And Cuphead does point out that he does, and also remarks that he seems to be the goat from the front yard. But then the goat proceeds to transform into the devil and tells him that his soul is his. And then Cuphead wakes up from the nightmare. And Mugman, who hears all of this from his top bunk, wonders if Cuphead is actually having his nightmare again. And what we find out is that this is a regular occurrence. Apparently, ever since Cuphead has started owing his soul to the devil, that he's been having a recurring nightmare where he thinks the devil's eventually going to come after him. And of course, when Mugman points out that obviously he seems to have been having a nightmare yet again, Cuphead just merely insists that obviously the devil runs a very big operation, and it's probably going to be a long while before he actually tries to steal his soul. At which point, Mugman finally gets sick of all of this and sick of this whole situation. So he decides to actually take Cuphead on a bit of a walk in the middle of the night. And of course, Cuphead has no idea what exactly it is that's going on. So he just kind of follows Mugman, even though he's annoyed about the fact that he had to leave in the middle of the night. And also, a really nice touch is that there actually is a goat in the front yard. And when they go outside, Cuphead immediately skirts around it because he thinks it's the devil, which is really funny. But in case, meanwhile, the devil. What we find out is that the devil, alongside his henchmen, the devil and henchmen are actually currently going through all of the different departments, and they're all just riffs on both the seven deadly sins, and also the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So of course they have gluttony, which I don't know the statistics and I'm not going to, but basically the joke is that they're all the different sins and all the different four horsemen of the apocalypse, and they're just on an all-time high. And the joke is that they start with gluttony, they then go into the famine department, and how famine is now on the rise, and also that they're starting as many wars as they can. And the devil obviously takes full credit for the fact that this operation is running in full swing, even though he doesn't really do anything. But and of course immediately insists that everything is running specifically according to plan, and that everything is running smoothly. So he decides to actually have a bit of a boast and decides to throw a celebration to celebrate all the hard work he's been doing. Obviously he proceeds to toast himself about all of his hard work, which and of course the other demons just kind of look at the devil, pointing out that he hadn't really done anything. He doesn't know what he's talking about, but obviously this is the first break they've gotten in 3,000 years, so they're not really complaining. But In case the devil then proceeds to point out that they've had a very productive year and points out the productive millennium and does point out that he hopes they can continue to have such a productive millennium. But of course, it's at this point where as you mentioned earlier, he's kind of the overarching antagonist of the Cuphead show. But Stickler, who is an original character for the cartoon, I should mention, he isn't in the game. He isn't in the game. He is unique to the Cuphead show. He is the first original character they made for the show, and what we find out is that he's actually the devil's accountant, and what we find out is that he apparently has OCD because as it turns out he points out that obviously there is the issue with Cuphead Soul about how it's still outstanding. And he does proceed to point out that obviously Cuphead lost the game of Soul Ball, so obviously Cuphead now has to give up his soul to the devil, and the soul has yet to be collected, and of course the devil merely insists that it's an accounting error and tries to go back to the festivities, but he obviously, I pointed out, he has OCD, so obviously he doesn't really buy it. And does continue to point out that obviously the devil needs to collect that soul or else, and of course what we find out is that Henchman does not like Stickler at all, and for good reason. Obviously both find Stickler annoying, so obviously he just looks at him and is like, yeah, this guy's annoying. But anyways, what we find out is that apparently Mugman has actually brought Cuphead to the forest near their house, and what we find out is that Mugman has actually brought a fizzy jawbreaker to drop into a well, which of course Cuphead protests to, pointing out that he had been working on that for months. But Mugman insists that was the only thing he could use because obviously he needed the water to fizz or he wouldn't show up. And when Cuphead is confused because obviously Mugman is playing a pronoun game, they then hear a voice telling them when in doubt the mug should give his brother one last hug. And of course, this causes Cuphead to freak out, but of course, Mugman reassures him that it's okay and tells him that it's obviously somebody that can help them with their situation. And sure enough, we then proceed to meet Quadras the Wise, who is a character from the Cuphead video game. He is the person that keeps track of all the times you died in the video game. That is his main role in the game. He keeps track of all your statistics when you go to talk to him. So. He shows up in the well. He's kind of an important figure in the Cuphead show, and he's the one who tells them that how they actually beat the devil. And what he explains is that there's a very special wool from a long distinct creature. And he says most of this in rhyme. He does at one point point out that it doesn't really get old, and he doesn't try to rhyme all the time. But he does point out that there is indeed a sweater that they can make from a wool of a long extinct creature, and does explain that said wool can be used to make a sweater that's immune to the effects of the devil and make him unable to actually steal Cuphead's soul. And then proceeds to reveal a large ball of yarn that's as we find out is invisible, and he just kind of hands in a ball of invisible yarn to Mugman and tells him to start knitting. And when Mugman asks him why he has to do it, the Quadras merely points out that obviously it only works if it's made with brotherly love. So this of course means that Mugman has to finish making the sweater by himself. And of course, while he's a little annoyed, he does thank Quadras for the information, then proceeds to start knitting. Meanwhile, the devil is still very much trying to enjoy the festivities that he set up to celebrate his quote unquote productivity. But of course, Stickler will not leave him alone. And of course, Henchman gets increasingly annoyed with him as well as the devil. And of course, Stickler does not leave him alone. He just continues to bother the devil as he's trying to enjoy the festivities. And of course, he's trying to sit punch. He's trying to eat deviled eggs, which he remarks he invented. Which is just really funny because it does have deviled in the name. It's a very clever word joke. But in any case, after several minutes of trying to enjoy the festivities, he eventually does get fed up with Stickler, and realizing Stickler isn't going to leave him alone, he then proceeds to make an announcement pointing out that he has something that he needs to go take care of, and it won't take more than a minute, and then proceeds to tell the rest of the demons to actually enjoy the festivities, and then he proceeds to poof out and leave. And of course, the henchman then proceeds to shoot death glares at Stickler and ask him if he's proud of himself. And of course, Stickler points out that he will not apologize for doing his job. At which point, and of course, it is at this point where the devil does proceed to actually show up, but he winds up showing up too late. As it turns out, Mugman had just finished the sweater just before the devil shows up, and gives it to Mugman, who gives it to Cuphead, who points out that it stinks, but when Mugman insists that's the only way they're going to beat the devil, he immediately puts it on, and does point out that it does feel kind of warm, but and of course at this point where the devil proceeds to show up, and of course the two then proceed to panic because they don't know if the sweater works yet or not, and of course the devil points out that he's only there to grab Cuphead's soul real fast and leave. So he tells them that he wants to make it quick, and proceeds to reach out and tries to steal Cuphead's soul, and then winds up being electrocuted by the sweater, which he points out is which he does proceed to point out is cheating because obviously he has an invisible devil-proof sweater, and that's not fair. But of course, Cuphead then proceeds to point out that he's very proud of his sweater, and then proceeds to pull Mugman into a hug, pointing out that obviously his brother made it for him, and it works because of his brotherly love. And of course, Mugman is very sheepish about the fact that he's been singled out. Obviously, they're facing the devil, so of course they're going to be a little annoyed, but. And of course, the devil then proceeds to point out that obviously this is going to be a long waste of time for him. So he then proceeds to ask Cuphead to simply take the sweater off, and of course Cuphead almost immediately complies, but Mugman insists that he should keep the sweater on, so he does. At which point the devil then proceeds to pull out a $10 bill and offers it to Cuphead in exchange for taking the sweater off, and of course Mugman points out that obviously Cuphead's soul is worth more than $10, and Cuphead agrees with him, and then asks the devil to double it, but which only annoys Mugman, and he proceeds to drag Cuphead off, and of course the devil becomes very much annoyed by this fact, and then proceeds to go into several different ideas to actually try and get Cuphead to take his sweater off. First and foremost, he pretends to be a carnival barker, and then proceeds to throw a sideshow attraction that is supposed to actually, that actually has an admission cost where they're supposed to take off their sweater before going in. There's no sweaters allowed, but of course Mugman sees through that immediately, pointing out that the barker seems a little bit shady, and also points out that obviously taking your sweater off is a very weird thing to actually do, to actually go inside and see a sideshow attraction. So for those reasons, he proceeds to tell Cuphead to keep the sweater on, and they proceed to leave. And of course this causes the devil to become infuriated, so he then proceeds to disguise himself as a hot dog cart, and then proceeds to offer a free hot dog, which and of course Cuphead immediately takes one, but then Mugman notices something strange on the hot dog, and as it turns out, there's just fine print printed on the hot dog that says that it'll release a swarm of sweater-eating moths. So for that reason, Mugman quickly realizes that something shady is going on, and proceeds to actually drag Cuphead off again, much to the devil's annoyment. And finally, the devil then proceeds to decide that, hey, I'm going to disguise myself as Quadratus, since that was the person who started this whole mess. But even though I don't think the devil should know that Quadratus was the one who gave them the idea, but obviously there's nobody else who could have done it. So of course he decides to disguise himself as Quadratus and pretends to be Quadratus. But of course the devil doesn't really disguise his horns. So of course Mugman immediately sees through that, and tells Cuphead to keep a sweater on, and they keep leaving. And eventually the devil finally gets sick of them continually stonewalling him. So he shows up at the very entrance of the forest, and prevents them from leaving. And then proceeds to insist that Cuphead proceeds to take his sweater off, and of course Cuphead outright refuses, and obviously points out that the devil can't do anything about it, and this of course causes the devil to fly into a rage, and proceeds to summon fire, which is what he does every time he's angry, and of course what we find out is that this actually winds up working and getting Cuphead to take his sweater off, because obviously it's a sweater, it's supposed to keep you warm. And of course the devil creating a lot of fire means that the fire is not the sweater is now working overtime to keep Cuphead warm, and he starts overheating, and the devil, realizing he can use this to an advantage, then gets even madder to summon more fire, and And of course, this causes Cuphead to start kind of losing control of himself, and realizes that he needs to get his sweater off or he's going to overheat. And even though Mugman insists that he needs to keep his sweater on, and then remembering what Quadras said about having faith and giving your brother a hug if you're lost, then decides to give Cuphead a huge hug, which both pins Cuphead's arms to his side so that he can't take his sweater off anymore, while also using brotherly love to protect them from the devil's fire. And of course, the devil eventually goes full nuclear and just burns down parts of the forest. But by that point, but of course, when the fire dies down, Cuphead and Mugman are still very much fine and okay, and then gloat that they're invincible, which of course causes the devil to finally realize that he has better things to do, and realize that obviously he's going to just have to wait for Cuphead to take the sweater off on his own. So he then decides to go back to the party and leaves the two boys to their devices, who then proceed to go back home. And the devil then proceeds to insist that he's taking care of Cuphead and now no longer has an outstanding issue with soul counts. So he then decides to actually cause the party to recommence, even though Stickler does proceed to point out that obviously he doubts that the devil has actually captured Cuphead's soul. But the devil merely points out that he put it back in the soul vault, but and never actually went to audit it, which of course causes Stickler to become annoyed and insists that the devil audit it right away. But of course the devil just burns Stickler's ledger and tells him that he'll probably have to recount again, which of course Stickler becomes annoyed with, because he realizes that now he has a very long night ahead of him, and proceeds to leave very annoyed. And well, the devil just kind of returns back to his celebration. And meanwhile, Cuphead is now very happy about the fact that he is now safe from the devil at long last, and is no longer going to have recurring nightmares about the devil trying to take his soul. And of course Mugman decides to deliver one last line. He points out, I don't forget what he says, but he points out that there's nothing better than to knit his brother's sweater, which Cuphead does point out that Quadras was right, and the rhymes get very old, and the episode ends. So yeah, obviously this episode does continue the plot of the series, which is that the devil's trying to take Cuphead's soul, and he's not really succeeding in that regard. And there's been a couple of episodes where he's done this now, but this one was the big one. This one was the one where it's like, where finally the devil's auditor finally came to him and is like, hey, you're missing a soul somewhere. I need you to go find that for me, please. And of course would not leave the devil alone until he actually wound up finding it. And presumably Stickler is just going to continue nagging on the devil until he actually goes and finds Cuphead's soul. So yeah, I mean the devil has kind of put a band-aid on it for the time being, sending Stickler off to go do his job and keep him from finding out that the soul is missing by burning the ledger and making him recount. But yeah, that's an inevitable conversation that is going to come up again, and I guarantee, and I'm probably off screen, but I can guarantee you that Stickler will come back to the devil and be like, yeah, you're still missing this soul. I need you to go find that, please. But yeah, I am. But yeah, this episode is interesting. But I do like how Cuphead was able to beat the devil with a sweater. That's kind of the funny things. That's the devil's one weakness is a magic sweater made with brotherly love, and I do kind of find that funny. But in any case, that is my review of the Cuphead show. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. And in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that are my way of saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video I recommend to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!